Hey guys, Will here. So a couple of months back now, Cube Controls reached out and very kindly sent us their GT Pro Wireless to test out and put through its paces. And I've been using that pretty much exclusively, at least when I'm driving on the Simucube, for all of my GT style racing pretty much since. I've been really happy with it. I had a couple of little glitches which I'll cover in this video, but for the most part, been really happy with the wheel. So when they recently reached out and offered to send me their Formula Pro Wireless wheel to test out, of course, I jumped straight on the opportunity. So that is what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be unboxing, going through all of the details of the Cube Controls Formula Pro Wireless wheel and go for a drive and see what it's like. So we'll get this guy back on the shelf and let's get started. Okay, so we won't spend too much time dawdling around with the unboxing because I know some of you just want to skip straight to the details, but some of you are interested in that as well. So we will go through it. So what do we have here? We've got our user manual at the top. And we actually didn't get a user manual with the GT wireless wheel. It was something that was emailed later on, and I did get an emailed copy as well. But this goes through all of the important stuff you need to know. Safety notice, of course, in today's modern world, a safety notice is important for everything. Quick button reference, rear panel reference, battery information, and syncing to the Simucube. Instructions for charging the battery. And we'll talk about all of this in more detail, obviously, as we get on. Wheel installation, so the stud patterns for the mounting bracket or the hub. Shifter paddle adjustment. Some useful tips there. Shifter maintenance, adjusting the shift paddle's activation point. Now, this is something that is really important, and we'll definitely be covering that in detail too. And that is it. So we've got our instruction manual. We'll set that guy aside. We've got a little marketing sheet here with some brand ambassador stuff on it, exactly the same one that came in the GT wheel as well. And then our sticker sheet. Now, it looks like they have pre-installed the 4 rotary encoder stickers for us, which a little bit strange. I guess it kind of makes it look cool when you take it out of the box, but I would have preferred to start off with the stickers that I want rather than the stickers that they want, because then if I want to change it later, it's a little bit more difficult to do so because you can't really reuse the stickers. But we'll just move that out of the way. You can see a very comprehensive set of stickers there, and they're all really nice, high quality, glossy stickers with some sort of a gel coating over the front as well. So they shouldn't wear and tear too badly. Now, admittedly, I haven't actually put any of the stickers on my GT wheel simply because I tend to not like having stickers on the wheel, but I think we might make an exception this time. I would like to put some of these stickers on, I think, and sort of test out how they go over time. But you can see we've got a huge range up here. But yeah, I can't imagine you would ever need any additional stickers on top of what we have here. So pretty all-encompassing. So get that guy aside as well. We've got a foam insert, which we obviously don't need. And then onto the main event. So we'll pop it out here, and we might move the box aside as well. I'll just quickly pop out the cord for the charging as well, the charging cable, which is inside one of these guys. There we go. We don't want to forget about that guy. So inside the lid here, we do have this little message similar to what Fnatic do on their boxes. So dreaming is a necessity, although every dream needs a glimpse of reality. Quote, Cube Control. So there you go. Now, there is a really important little sticker here as well. I'm just going to zoom in on the other camera on that for you guys. So this is actually really important. It says, please read the user manual, which I always encourage everybody to do, although admittedly, I don't always do it myself. So that is definitely something that we did run into with the GT Pro wheel, and I will cover that in detail in today's video as well for you guys. But let's get on to the wheel itself now. All right, let's get this bag opened up and take a look. Here it comes. Ta-da! Very nice. So, all right. So let's start off by going through the inputs or the controls that are on the wheel. Now, being a Simucube wireless-based wheel, we are limited to 28 total inputs, and I'm happy to report that they have taken full advantage of the full 28 here on this wheel. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 push buttons. 2 more positional switches as well, which aren't momentary, so they do flick into position. So one position being off or no signal, and the other being on or a present signal. So that is one input as well. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Then we have obviously our 2 shifter paddles as well for 15 and 16. And then we have our thumb encoders here. So 1, 2 in each way, 3, 4. And then 4 rotary encoders as well. So if we add all of those together, it equals 28 inputs. Now, some people would prefer to have a 7-way funky switch like what we have on the Asher Racing wheel. So if we look at that by comparison, You can see we've got two funky switches here, one on either side, and these also have rotary encoders built in. Now, I find that to be really useful when I'm playing titles like Assetto Corsa Competizione, where you kind of have to go through menus, F1 2019 as well, where you have to go through menus to kind of change pit settings or change your tires, stuff like that. The funky switches can actually be really useful. But I also miss having thumb encoders on the Asher Racing wheel. That's something that I used to use all the time, and actually do use all the time on my Fanatic wheel. So if we compare that one, for example, go over here. This guy, we do actually have the two thumb encoders, but we also have a funky switch too. Now, obviously, being a physically connected wheel in this case, we don't have that 28 input limitation. But just something to weigh up when you are choosing wheel, guys. No funky switch means menu navigation is going to be a little bit more tricky. But then on the plus side, we do have the ability to change all sorts of different trims and stuff. So, you've got engine management modes, fuel trims, what else have we got? Anti-roll bars, brake balance. All those sorts of things can all be adjusted right on the wheel while you're driving without having to take your eyes off the road, which will genuinely make you faster around the circuit, at least in my experience. Now, I should also mention here as well, when we switch the wheel on, the buttons do illuminate. And we'll have a look at this in more detail once we're over on the rig and we can adjust the lighting a bit better. You're not going to see it too brightly in this light. We are in a studio with really bright studio lights beaming straight down on us. But the lights on these wireless wheels are dimmer. We talked about this in the GT Pro wireless wheel review as well. They are dimmer than they are on the physically connected or the USB powered wheels, and that's simply to preserve battery life. And we'll talk about battery life in just a moment too. But they do illuminate, and I'll show you that on the rig a little bit later on once we're all set up and running. So the buttons themselves have a really nice tactile feel to them. They don't have a huge amount of travel, probably only about 1 millimeter of travel there. But they're nice and stiff, and you're not going to push them by accident, which is really nice. Now, you can also see we've got these plastic surrounds around the buttons as well. It makes it a little bit easier to sort of feel which button is which without taking your eyes off the road. And this is going to be really beneficial for driving in VR as well, I think. So up here, you can see we've got the ridge there, different ridge here. So as you move your thumb around, you can kind of feel with your thumb where you are on the wheel without having to look at it, which is really cool. So that is a handy little inclusion as well. Now, the rotary encoders themselves have a really nice solid click to them. This is what rotary encoders on a steering wheel should feel like. You've heard me not necessarily complain, but highlight that the rotary encoders on some of the Fanatic wheels are maybe a little bit too loose. They don't have quite enough of a definition in each click. That is absolutely not a problem with this wheel at all. All the clicks, all the dentations on the rotary encoders are really solid. And you're definitely not going to be sort of wondering how many clicks you did when you turn them, which is really great. So they really have nailed that, at least in terms of a first impression. We'll comment on it more when we go for a drive a little bit later on. But yeah, really, really nice feel on all of those rotary encoders. Every single one of them is also billet aluminium anodized as well. So really nice quality knobs. Really no concerns whatsoever in terms of the quality of the inputs on the front face of the wheel. Now, you may also be wondering what these two little guys are here. So we have a battery indicator LED as well as a connection status LED. Now, just regarding battery life, we have a 1500 milliamp battery internally, and that is good for up to 40 hours of usage as they quote. Now, in my experience with the GT wireless wheel, which is pretty much for all intents and purposes exactly the same as this wheel in terms of the electronics and the interface, I have been getting, well and truly over 30 hours, somewhere between 30 and 40 hours out of a charge. Often I've forgotten to switch the wheel off, come back the next day, the lights are still on and it's still running, and I can still drive for pretty much an entire day without any issues. So yeah, I can tell you with confidence in the 4 or 5 months that I've been using the other wheel, I haven't had any issues whatsoever with battery life. The light does come on when you've got a couple of hours to go, so you need to plug it in and give it a good charge before the next drive, but it's not going to catch you out in the middle of a league race or something like that, unless you were doing some massive endurance race like a 24-hour race or something like that, in which case you probably want to be plugged in anyway. You're not going to have any problems whatsoever with battery life. So just a quick little note there for you guys. But let's talk a little bit more about ergonomics now, and then we'll take a more detailed look at the shifters. So we have a grip to grip or wheel diameter measurement of 282 millimeters. So that's from here to here or across the wheel. So 280 millimeter wheel for all intents and purposes there. So just for comparison reasons, 10 millimeters more than we have with the Fanatic Formula style wheels, and pretty much exactly the same as what we have with the Asher Racing wheels that I've tested. We've got a maximum grip diameter of 45 millimeters here, and these do have a really nice chunky feel to them. They fit really nicely in your hand. There's no kind of problems anywhere with anything feeling funny or out of place. It really is a perfect, and I don't use that word lightly, but it's a perfectly designed grip for the way that at least my hands fit it. And I can reach the paddles on either side just fine as well. We'll talk about the adjustment that we have available on the paddles in just a moment. But what I want to highlight here as well, just when I hold it like this, there's nothing to sort of snag your hands on as you turn the wheel. With some wheels, as you turn them, particularly as you go that way, your hand can kind of bash up against switches and stuff like that. It can kind of end up giving you blisters on that part of your thumb. But with the design of this wheel in particular, we've got a nice big opening here, which means there's plenty of room for our hands to move around inside without any rubbing or funny issues like that. Now the grips themselves are some sort of a rubberized or polyurethane type material. I'm not sure exactly what the material is that they've used, but they've got a nice amount of squish to them. They appear to be injection molded as well. You can see the little seam on the edge there. But yeah, really nice feel, the right amount of squish as well. And I think, you know, I've been on the fence a little bit about rubber grips in the past. When I tried out the rubber grips on the GT1 wheel from Simucube, I wasn't all that impressed with them. They felt okay, but I preferred the feel of the leather or the Alcantara grips on my other wheels to them. But these have a really good amount of squish on them, and having that little bit of squish there does feel quite nice over what we have with more solid grips that have Alcantara or leather as well. So I think that's a good design choice there, and that is what you find on the genuine Formula style wheels that are used in real life motorsport most of the time as well. So a nice little addition there to have a similar style material. But yeah, a good amount of squish there, and they do feel really nice in your hands. I think they're probably gonna sweat a little bit without gloves, but I always wear gloves anyway. We'll talk about that when we go for a drive a little bit later on as well. Now, one other thing that we of course do need to test as well is flex. Now I can tell you, although I'm not the strongest guy in the world by any means, I can't really get that to flex at all. At least holding it in my hands right now. We'll comment on this more when we go for a drive as well, but I can't feel any flex there whatsoever. And looking at the design, I was a little bit concerned simply because it's not a unibody design like we've seen in some other wheels, like the Asher Racing wheel, for example. So we do have this anodized aluminium enclosure here, but you can see it ends down the bottom here, and it also ends right where the rubber grip meets on the edge here as well. So it doesn't actually extend throughout the grip like we have with some other wheels. So all we actually have here supporting the grips is this carbon fiber here. Now this is genuine multi-layered carbon fiber by the looks of things. It certainly doesn't look fake, and I wouldn't expect it to be fake on a wheel of this caliber. But if we measure that quickly, 4 millimeters thick, and that certainly does appear to be enough, at least for my level of strength. I'm not feeling any flex there whatsoever. So that's all well and good. So let's spin around now and have a look at the back side of the wheel. So on the top, as we go around here, we've got the laser engraved Cube Controls logo. And that is simply just a laser's gone over that and removed the anodizing from the coating. So it's a sort of silver finish. It's the raw material of the aluminium that you can see there through the etching. So really nicely finished logo there. But anyway, so on the back, we've got our power switch, which is just a push in and pop out style button. We've got our little Bluetooth antenna as well, a little stubby antenna there, and we'll talk about signal quality a little bit later on too. We've got our universal hub mounting system here as well, which has 70 as well as 50.8 millimeter stud patterns. Some of the holes have M5 threads already tapped in them, whereas some of them are straight through as well. So whether you've got a quick release that has threads or straight through holes on it, you should be pretty well covered with this mount. Now, one thing that I have noticed in my GT wheel is that there is a little bit of flex in this quick release hub itself. It appears to be actually where it mounts to the back of the wheel. I think it's actually maybe the rear plate of the wheel that's got a little bit of flex in it, but we'll look at that in more detail once we're up and running on the rig as well. Now, I want to make this really clear. It hasn't been enough flex that I've noticed it when I'm driving at all, but just when I've been testing out some different quick release systems, mounting systems for various different wheelbases, I have noticed that that seems to be the point where any flex comes from. So if I really push it as hard as I possibly can, that appears to be the weakest link in the chain, so to speak. But certainly not an issue, at least in my experience when we're driving, but I'll show you that later on once we're up on the rig as well. So let's talk about these shifters a little bit more now, because these are a pretty unique design, both in terms of their electronics and their mechanical design as well. So we've got carbon fiber paddles here, which are also 4 millimeters thick. I'll just quickly check that for you to make sure 100%, but they appear to be exactly the same. Yep, 4 millimeters thick. Exactly the same. And then the mounts for the paddles that bolt onto the wheel are also 4 millimeter thick carbon fiber as well. So we've got about 17 millimeters of adjustment on the paddles themselves. And then we've got this really clever design here with some little screws that you can loosen off to also adjust the angle of the paddle itself. So you can see there, as I move that around, that's adjusting probably a good 20 degrees, I would say. It's hard to, I don't have a protractor, so it's a little bit hard to measure, but you can see just how much that's moving forward and back there. So I can have it all the way out there, pretty much all the way to as far as my fingers can throw, but that's probably actually a little bit too far for me, even with my spidery long fingers. About there, we kind of want to have it sort of in the small of our top knuckles there, so a little bit further in. About there is perfect. There we go. Now, just for those of you who might be wondering as well, I measured the throw of the shifter itself to be about 9 millimeters. Now, that's not adjustable with these shifters. There's not too many shifters out there which are adjustable in terms of the amount of throw or how far the paddle moves when you pull it. But yeah, about 9 millimeters of travel there. Now, they don't come with different magnets or anything like that, so you are stuck with the tension or the magnetic strength that comes out of the box. But this feels about right to me. I don't think any stiff would be any useful, and I certainly don't see any misshifts happening with the amount of strength that we have here. But we mentioned before that these were a little bit unique in terms of their electronic design as well. And the reason for that is they're actually using Hall effect sensors rather than contact switches to detect when a shift is made. So what a Hall effect sensor does is it actually measures the magnetic field present in a particular location. So it's a little metal plate, and it actually measures the flow of electrons and how they deflect across the metal plate based on the presence of a magnetic field. So as the magnet gets closer to the plate, the electrons flow one direction, and then as the magnet moves away, then they flow the other direction. So what the sensor itself does is vary the output voltage based on the magnetic field, and that gives us a way to know exactly what the distance is, and we can actually use that as an analog input as well as a mechanical switch style input as well. So in this implementation, all we're doing is we're using an amplifier circuit. When the voltage varies beyond a certain point, it tells it to activate the switch, and when you go back the other way, it tells you to deactivate the switch. So we have these two little grub screws on the back here, which we can remove. And there's little trim pots or variable resistors underneath those screws that we need to adjust just to make sure that our shifts are working correctly. Now, I did find on my GT Pro wheel that I had to make a few fine tuning adjustments. One of the shifters wasn't working out of the box, and that's what that notice that we saw on the box before was alluding to. You might need to make a little adjustment there to get it right. Now, what I did initially when I adjusted it was I adjusted it right at the cusp, so it was just activating as the switch got right to the very end of the throw. And what I found is as the battery inside the wheel started to drain, obviously that voltage changes ever so slightly, and that was actually throwing the adjustment out a little bit. So I was finding when I had a low battery, I wasn't getting my shifts. And what I did was I adjusted those trim pots a little bit more just to give me a little bit more scope. And after I did that, I didn't have any further problems. So just be aware that when you are adjusting the shifters, give yourself a little bit of headroom in the adjustment, adjust it a little bit further than you might need to, just to make sure that as that battery voltage varies, you don't run into any problems with misshifts. So are these an advantage or a disadvantage? It's hard to sort of say because, I mean, not having any mechanical moving parts like a contact switch, theoretically they should last forever and you should never really have any problems. But in terms of the electronics required to make this work, it is actually a little bit more complex. So longevity-wise, it's hard to say. A solid-state device should theoretically last longer than a mechanical switch. But yeah, I haven't had any issues with any of my wheels in terms of losing the ability to shift, so I can't really comment on it. But yeah, it's just something to be aware of because it is something that's a little bit unique about the design of these wheels. I'm not going to say that it's a pro or a con, it's just something that's different. Now, I just realized that I forgot to weigh the wheel before as well, so let's just quickly chuck it on my scales here, my dodgy Tupperware scales. 978 grams. Now, I'm not going to pull this wheel apart simply because I did pull apart the GT Pro wireless wheel when I did that review, and I'm sure that this is pretty much exactly the same internally. They're using their own custom designed PCB. It's exactly the same Bluetooth module as well, but there are some wires and connections inside that are a little bit tight, and I don't really want to risk breaking it. So you can check out that other video if you want to see a little bit more detail on that. But yeah, I didn't see any issues in terms of build quality, bad soldering or anything like that, and it is their own custom design PCB as well. So yeah, check out that video if you want to see what the insides of one of these wheels look like. But one more thing that we do need to talk about quickly is the USB connection on the bottom here as well. So let's have a quick chat about that. All right, so I'm going to flip it around this way, upside down for now while we do this, and I'll bring the cable over. And actually notice there was this little bag as well inside, which I didn't notice before when we were unboxing. So we'll have a quick look at that as well and just see what's inside this. Imagining, yeah, there's a set of tweezers there for applying the stickers as we had with the other wheel as well. And it looks like we got some screws. Okay, that's actually more in there than I expected. So we've got some little bolts here, long and short, for mounting the quick release. We've got our little screwdrivers here as well for undoing some of the torque screws, as well as adjusting those trim pots that we were talking about earlier. Some Allen keys too for undoing the wheel, and then a couple of nuts as well if we need those. So everything that you're going to need to get the wheel mounted, as well as applying those stickers. But let's have a look at this USB connection now. So when we pulled the GT Pro wireless apart, we found that it was physically only the plus and minus, or negative and positive connections for the battery charging included in this cable. So this cable is literally just a battery charging cable. There's no physical connection or USB connection or anything like that to the PC. So it does only work in wireless mode. So if you're wanting to buy one of these wheels for connecting via USB with a view to later on using it as a Simucube wireless wheel, you can't do that. It will only connect to your computer via the wireless connection. So just be aware of that. But a nice coil connection here. Unfortunately, it was a little bit sort of screwed up inside the bag or inside the box, so it's lost its shape a little bit, but I'm sure that will straighten up as the other one did over a little bit of time. A nice, good quality USB cable though. We've got some chokes on either side as well to reduce any EMI through the system. Now, these connections themselves, when I did the review of the GT Pro wireless wheel, I commented on how I liked these connections. Now, My opinion on that has changed a little bit as I've been exposed to some more higher end gear. And what I have found over time as well is that the plastic connections here where they screw on have gotten a little bit sloppy. So what you find is that they do tend to cross thread a little bit. If you're not really careful when you put them on, they don't go on cleanly, and then you end up with cross threading. You can also, being plastic threads as well, over tighten them and strip them over time. So yeah, I think that they probably could for the price. I think this is probably going to be the one thing that I feel isn't up to scratch with the rest of the wheel. Everything else on the wheel is really nice, high-end quality, and you really couldn't want for more. But these connections, I feel like they could have done better. If you have a look at the review we did of the Race Logic V-Box in particular, which was using really expensive Limo connectors, which are overkill for a simulator really, but also the dashboard that we reviewed from Simcore a couple of days ago as well, really, really high quality connections on those. And I do feel like, yeah, I feel like Cube Controls could do better with this, particularly with something that is going to be, you know, going through mechanical stress while you're driving. Obviously, you're driving with the wheel, and this might be connected while you're charging it. Or on the USB versions of the wheel, this is going to have to be connected while you're driving. And it is, you know, you do have the strain relief, which is provided in having a coiled cable, obviously, but you know, it is still going to be experiencing some forces, and I'm not quite sure how it would stand the test of time. So, yeah, that's probably the one thing looking at the wheel that I would definitely like to see improved in the future. But anyway, let's get this quick release mounted onto the wheel now and go for a drive. So let's start off talking about flex. Now I'm happy to report that there was noticeably less flex to this wheel than I'd experienced previously with the wireless GT wheel. I think most of it's down to the actual construction of the wheel itself. Any flex that you might have seen here is simply just because I literally am pushing and pulling on it as hard as I possibly can. Absolutely nothing noticeable when driving. Now speaking of driving, really happy with the wheel ergonomically. It's actually amazing what difference an extra 10 millimeters makes. That's what she said. But no, honestly, I could really feel the difference, particularly driving in Assetto Corsa Competizione. I felt like I had a little bit more control, and the steering was noticeably less snappy than it is using a 270mm wheel. So something to just pay attention to there as well. Size does matter, so to speak. Now, driving with gloves or without gloves, both were very, very comfortable. And I've got to say, I think ergonomically, this wheel may be my new favorite Formula style wheel. Just the thickness of the grips and the way the grips are molded to your hands just really does feel very, very good. And it really does give you that extra sense of control that's missing on more rounder style grips. So really appreciate those grips more than I thought I would, to be honest. Now I drove for about an hour with no gloves on, and I didn't have any real problems with sweaty palms, no more so than I have had with any other wheel, whether it Alcantara or leather. So that potential concern didn't really turn out to be an issue either, I'm happy to report. Now, in terms of accessibility to buttons, whether playing in VR or with triple screens, no issues there either. I could feel very easily where the buttons were with my thumbs. The dentations on the rotary encoders make them very easy to use, and just the right amount of resistance, whether driving with or without gloves, to feel exactly where you are. No question as to whether you've pushed a button or turned a dial or not. And honestly, overall, I couldn't really find anything in terms of the driving experience that would steer me away from this wheel. The only thing that I did miss was that 7-way funky switch for navigating menus. That was a bit of a pain, but easily solved by using a button box or a keyboard or something that you have beside you. So not really a problem, but again, just something like we said earlier in the video to be aware of. If you are navigating menus a lot and you're not spending so much time changing settings on the car, you might be better off looking at a wheel that has a funky switch. But otherwise, absolutely brilliant. So there you go, guys. That is the Formula Pro wireless wheel from Cube Controls. And honestly, there's not really a whole lot on here that I can nitpick. I mean, other than that USB connection, or that charging connection in the case of this particular wheel, which I would like to see them improve. Everything else is really high quality, no issues whatsoever, no problems with connection. You know, all that sort of stuff was all fine. Ergonomically, it's brilliant as well. It's comfortable to hold for long periods. Ergonomically, it's been absolutely fine as well. I've driven with this for probably 5 or 6 hours now over the course of the last few days, putting together this review, and no blisters anywhere, no problems driving with or without gloves, and no wear on the urethane either, which is great. Assuming that it is urethane, I'm still not 100% sure on that. But yeah, whatever material it is, no problems with wear whatsoever. And yeah, just look, overall, a really, really fantastic wheel. So no problems at all from me recommending this wheel. And yeah, hopefully you guys have found the video useful. So if you have, make sure you leave a thumbs up, make sure you're subbed, hit the notification bell too so you don't miss future videos. And I think that's it. So I'll see you guys again soon. Bye. you.